first sort of key question is not Evie, this is your life, and then the old
Oh, really? I'd quite like a "this is your life."
Well, I mean, it is. I find it always interesting for people who are listening to actually understand how pre becoming, I suppose, a VC working for
Yeah.
Astia, what was that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And mine looks a bit different than your typical. And although I did work in investment banking through law, it's not the typical necessarily path to VC. And when I joined Astia 13 years ago, Astia wasn't investing ourselves. So I didn't even see that in my trajectory when I joined Astia. So I started my career as a finance lawyer here in the UK. I worked in private practice and in-house at Barclays Capital Investment Bank. So I worked in M&A and transactions. So I've been around high growth companies and finance.
Did Barclays then the jump to Astia, or was there a little sort of...
No, I went back to private practice, Osborne Clarke, and then I moved to Silicon Valley, thinking I'd carry on being a lawyer and doing
like,
that.
Oh, I'm gonna I'll go.
Yeah.
This way.
Why not? I think lawyers. Yeah, I'll pack a bag and go. But I think lawyers are very. We don't see ourselves as having transferable skills, even though we have such transferable skills, right? So everything I learned as a lawyer in training, and then when I was practicing post-qualification, I had an amazing partner that I worked under, so huge credit to him. But I use all those skills every day now. But I think when we have a very closed view of ourselves as a lawyer, and actually it's a fantastic grounding. But yeah, so I went to Silicon Valley thinking I'd carry on being a lawyer, and landed and be like surrounded by all this innovation and exciting companies and just the ecosystem there. And I'd be like, why would I want to be a finance lawyer, never leave my office? So the hours.
What year was this, Evie?
What year? It was 2008.
Okay. Good time to go.
Yeah. Kind of interesting few years, isn't it? Wasn't it? In the economy.
Break and then reshape. I'd probably And so in the Valley, the aspiration was it kind of, did you go with the law firm and then, or did you just kind of, I'm going to go to Silicon Valley and see what I can do? And
my husband, this makes me sound very not as strong as a woman as I actually am, but my husband transferred his job there. We worked at the same law firm. He worked in commercial, so the whole office there is to set up to work with American companies. So my finance background was not the relevant skill that they were looking for. So I actually moved over with him and met Sharon, the CEO of Astia at the time, that the organization, she was really looking to expand beyond Silicon Valley across the US, but also into Europe. So I joined her at that point. And when you meet Sharon, you'll realize that once you've met her, she's extremely inspiring and engaging. And yeah, we have a very long-standing team because you can't leave because you're so inspired by what she's leading. Absolutely. And yeah. Fieldhouse will back me up here because they connected us to you, and we have known the Fieldhouse people for 10 plus years as well. So they know the same story.
Okay. And Sharon founded Astia 20 years ago?
She wasn't the founder. She's the third executive. But her passion for what Astia stands for and our values and our mission is often leads people to think that she was the founder, and she has been there since 2004. But no, it was actually founded by Kate Muther, the CMO of Cisco at the time it went public. She realized that women weren't participating at the levels that she was within her organization, but also peer organizations. And despite being qualified, despite having the skill set, experience, etc. So she did a number of things with her personal wealth at the time, but one of those was to set up Astia 20 years ago, as you rightly say. So that's why we have such a strong mission and values around working with and now investing in companies that include women in the executive team.
Okay, get it. And I mean, look, you know, I think the really interesting thing about Astia is, you know, we've seen probably a number of funds, I suppose, not become copycats, but there has been a trend line, obviously, as more and more VCs look to have that unique aspect of the way they invest. Naturally, and rightly so, there has been a trend in probably the last 5 years towards, I suppose, the principles that Astia stand for, which, you know, if I was a founder who's listening or watching today, what would those kind of magnets that you, or those kind of like the thesis, or the what you stand for, what magnets would be pulling those founders in?
Yeah, so ultimately, our investment thesis as a fund is that we invest in women, and that's our investment strategy, that inclusive teams outperform. The data shows that, and our 20-year history certainly shows that. And we, as an organization, we're very different to your usual venture capital fund. And as we've talked about, we're 20 years old. We've worked with high growth companies that include women for those 20 years in different ways, but we've built up an exceptional community that we surround our entrepreneurs with, but also just the experience of working with those teams. They do look different, and they are different. So we have the experience of doing that. But also Astia, because of how we were founded, we're very entrepreneur centric. So our values lie in being entrepreneur centric. We value women as leaders. And I think the 20 years really, you're right, more funds have come online over the last 5+ years that focus on this too. And absolutely key, quite frankly, to the high growth ecosystem, because as we all see and read for the last 20 years, the amount of venture capital that's actually deployed into these teams is so woefully low, it's embarrassing. And I'm delighted that others are joining us in doing it. We have always been about collaboration at Astia. That's another one of our values. And for the teams that we are investing in, great to hear that others are joining us as well in the investment thesis, whether it's their core thesis or whether it's just part of their investment process. But venture capital really, you know, the process of venture capital really needs to change to be able to deploy capital into those companies. And so funds that are looking at things in different ways, like we are, absolutely glad to see more and more of them in the market.
Well, one of the things that I was interested in, as you kind of alluded to there, the process is about the expert Sift. I was wondering if you could tell us about that. It looks really interesting. So.
Yeah, so what we have built over our 20 years is this process, the Astia Expert Sift. So we have used that all through our history, whether we were an incubator, an accelerator, even before investment days. We used this process to select the companies that we would work with pre-investment. And we now use that process to help us source and screen the companies that we consider for investment, both on the fund and our direct investment programs. So it's something that we've developed and enhanced over 15 years, but it's really at its core is making sure that we are eliminating bias in the investment process as much as we can. I think we all acknowledge that within the community, but certainly the three of us here on this call, acknowledge that bias exists in every walk of life, but certainly in venture capital. And what we've done at Astia is put a stake in the ground that we need to change that. And our Expert Sift is our mechanism for doing that. So sourcing and screening deals to make sure that we are eliminating bias. So we use a very curated community and the Astia expert community. So our Astia advisors, there are over 5,000 Astia advisors. And so we make sure that that group is diverse and not just gender, but race, geography, age, sector, background, their skills, to make sure that it's not just the four of us that sit on the fund team, investment team around our table, that it's our network, but it's this huge network of people that are helping source the companies that we take a look at, but then also help us screen those companies, that it's not just the four of us on the investment team that are helping us look at whether these companies are the right companies to be investing in. So the process takes companies through various different levels of the Sift. We check as an executive team right at the start to make sure the companies meet some basic criteria in terms of that it does have a woman in a position of equity and influence. It is pursuing high growth and it has some element of traction. But other than that, we make sure that we are not touching it as a team until the expert Sift does its job and produces the shortlist of company, funnels the companies down to a shortlist that then the investment team and our direct investors take a look at from that point. So we make, go ahead.
Sorry, did that start as a manual process and then it became automated and you guys developed internal tools to do all of that, or how does that work?
So it absolutely was very manual. It was very time consuming. When I joined, it was spreadsheets. It was, it took so much of our internal resources to make sure that we were doing it. But now, thankfully, due to two of our community members, David and Sylvia, who built us our own platform, Astia Connect. So it sits on top of Salesforce and it uses Google for security, but they built us our platform so that now we're able to really deliver at scale. So last year we saw over $1 billion US worth of opportunity go in the top of the funnel. And just in the first half of this year, we've seen over 2 billion. So we really needed to move across from spreadsheets. You can't really, process that on spreadsheets. So yeah, kudos to David and Sylvia for moving us over to Astia Connect and all the hard work that they continue to do. So it's now automated.
And is there machine learning in there as well that, I'd be curious to see if there are any interesting insights that came out of the machine learning aspect, if it exists.
Yeah, so we don't have machine learning necessarily because we still are utilizing the Astia advisor, and it's their expertise that we're utilizing through this. But there's certainly learnings that we have made by looking at and analyzing the data. So we do that with our board of trustees, and that's something slightly different to other venture funds because our investment activity sits under a not-for-profit. There's governance procedures in place. We have a board of trustees. Anyway, I'm digressing. But, we analyze that data very seriously as a team, but also with our board to make sure that any learnings that we can take from it, we do. So 4 years ago, time is difficult to calculate after COVID.
Well, we're in 2019, so come back from there.
Yeah, thank you. So 4 years ago, we realized that actually, whilst the expert Sift did a really good job of making sure we had diverse companies from a racial perspective, what we had was a problem at the point of investment. So we did a number of things at that time to really highlight the fact. So this is this is why data is great, right? That we can really look into the data. We can see that the amount of companies, the percentage of companies with executives from a racial perspective is the same at the top as it is from the bottom. But within the portfolio, we had 0 at the time that we were doing this analysis, which is
interesting,
hideous. But what we are good at Astia is making sure that we, learn from the data that we have from our 20-year history. So now we've changed that. We had lots of difficult conversations, which we're not afraid to have. When you're dealing with underrepresented teams, you have lots of difficult conversations. This is not all male white guys around the table, so we have had to do things differently, and it's not always easy. It's not always an easy conversation, so that certainly wasn't an easy conversation to get started. But what we are proud of, the fact is that we had the conversation and things have changed since. And when we talk about women at Astia, we certainly mean all women. It's not just white women, because I think a lot of things, initiatives, investment into women within high growth ecosystem can often benefit white women, whereas we need to be benefiting all women.
Well,
so that's, yeah.
Kudos, because it is definitely challenging to confront your biases in a non-judgmental way, and then also helping others to confront their biases. It's a dicey environment sometimes, so kudos to that.
It is difficult, but without having those conversations, we're not going to change things, are we? So yeah. Thank you.
So Evie, practically speaking, if okay, we have the bright flashing lights, Astia does this. If I am a female founder and I would like you to, I'm attracted to those bright flashing lights. How does that work? Is it? Do I have to find this expert? Do I have to apply via a general sort of process? How do we find each other?
Yeah, so we find our entrepreneurs in two ways. One, if you're an entrepreneur that's heard of us, you can submit your materials on our website, no introductions needed. So astia.org, apply, and you can submit your materials. We look at every single company that applies. And we do. As a team, we look at every single company. And then we also...
Do you respond to those companies? Or I often have people who, obviously Anthony and I and Paolo, and on the advisory side of our business, you have that classic, I blind applied to 300 VCs, and how can you help me if I'm already in touch with all of them? And I'm like, you kind of are not actually that. You might be in touch with some of them, but you perhaps might have better, it's perhaps better to have an intro, but
a warm intro.
But one of the comments that they do come back with, and I really feel for founders, is that some of I'm not naming names, but there's certain people they just never hear back from, and they've done the big, I've seen some of the forms, they're extensive. They take hours, maybe days to complete, and they hear nothing. And it's kind of is it just the person at the end? And they've done their research. They know that they're right for that fund. They're SaaS, they're B2B, or they're cybersecurity, or they're female led, and they just get nothing. And I just really feel for founders when that happens. But obviously, you're in the good camp.
Well, hopefully, and we try to improve. I'll tell you about one of the improvements we've implemented recently, but like VCs don't charge for entrepreneurs to submit their materials to them, but obviously time is money when you're a growing business. So it's really important that we try to be, as investors, as transparent as possible. So yes, we do. Every company that applies will have an email to say thank you for the submission. And then once we've looked at it to assess it against those three basic criteria I mentioned earlier, they will get we've looked at your company. Yes, you fit the criteria, and we're moving you on to the next stage. And as they go through the Sift, they get updates in terms of where they are. And it might take a couple of weeks in a section of the Sift, but they will always know how they've done at that section and if they're moving forwards. And even if they don't move forwards to the next part of the expert Sift process, they can log into the Astia Connect, our platform that I mentioned that we operate all this on, and they can see all the feedback that we leave. So all our advisors' feedback gets made available to the entrepreneurs. So it's all anonymized and aggregated so that our advisors feel that they can leave honest and helpful feedback, but entrepreneurs get to see that so that they can log in and see. And whilst they might not agree with all the feedback that we give them and share with them, at least they know where our decision comes from. And I think where we have recently improved, I think, is when we look at a company at that very early criteria screen, we call it, checking those three basic criteria. Initially, we've sent them an email saying you're a bit too early for us, and I guess that's not particularly helpful. What does early mean? But now what we've done in the last couple of months is when we as a team are reviewing companies, we're putting in comments. Everybody on the team puts in their comments as to why they think it's a bit too early if we do, and so that the entrepreneurs can get even more visibility. So hopefully there's always improvements to be made, but we do try to be as transparent as possible with our entrepreneurs as where they are in that Sift process and the feedback. Because you're right, entrepreneurs fundraising, you get a lot of no's, or actually even worse, they get lots of maybes, or come back and tell me come back in a couple of months and update me, or as actually a no is easier than is more helpful than that. But they often don't get the feedback. And that's a lot of the work that we do under kind of our not-for-profit, our mission related work is not all down to our investment. It's not all on the investment team that happens. It's because we've got this broader organization and mission and values that we make sure that that's an important part of our process. I'm sure we can be even more transparent, but we try to be.
I think we've touched on some really interesting areas already on the podcast. I also want to touch on, you're pretty successful. You're doing very well as a business. And you're finding those female founders and underrepresented founders, and you are helping them grow and succeed. So I suppose in a way that leads me to are there particular verticals, are there particular businesses that you'd want to draw out that you could just highlight to the audience, Evie, where you're seeing that growth and that strength?
Oh, interesting. In fact, Astias we've always performed our best, whether it's when we've been investing or prior to that, the companies that we were working with through an accelerator, when we worked across sectors.
Okay.
So it sounds like a bit of a cop-out to your question, but in fact, we've always, our performance as investors has always been better, and the companies that we worked with through our accelerator have always performed better when we invested across sectors and worked with companies across high growth sectors. So absolutely focused on investor returns. So it's high growth businesses, but we have such a variety in our portfolio, and because of the Astia community being so diverse and a large community, we're able to screen their deals and we're able to work with them post investment. We've got the expertise to back that up, and it actually. It hasn't ever skewed to one particular vertical. No. It's quite interesting. We'll get patterns of when we're looking at the submissions that we get into Astia as a team. We'll get a few that are all in a couple of weeks. We'll get a few that are all around a similar sector. We're like what's happened recently? What's happened recently? It's quite like this week it was sexual intimacy. There were a few in that area. I was like, why? It's quite strange how
coincidence.
Through a year different, but I wouldn't say any particular verticals, and because we've always performed best as investors when we've invested cross sector.
Okay, I suppose the flip side of that is, any kind of predictions maybe for the year ahead? Are there going to be perhaps any areas that you think could see more investment for I suppose as we apparently come out of the pandemic and things normalize, and are there is there an area that you as a business internally discuss and you think, oh, this could really happen, or do you just is it difficult to do that? I'm just curious what
so we might have read the same data, because you were alluding to how much venture capital had been deployed already this year or raised this year. I think it was CB Insights in terms of the amount of $1 of every 5 has been invested into fintech. And it was just like, I think that sector will just continue to boom. It's like, it's quite broad in terms of what all the subsectors that fit under fintech. But I think that's just the way we now live as a society has now changed. Not many places accept coins anymore around at least where I live. You have to pay everything in card. Right. Just from a very basic level, how the pandemic has changed how we purchase as consumers.
Well, the sort of consolidation of different verticals, it's going to morph. We're just going to see a lot of blurry lines as we move ahead in the next couple of years as to what big tech businesses are doing. They've had it in China for 5 or 10 years. I think it's but I think now in Europe and the UK especially that's going to happen. Which is good. But yes. So then any other little.
Well, I think just personal. This is not necessarily Astia, but view on things. But just how we as people has suffered over the last 18 months. I can't begin to think why. Any solution, be that technical or non-technical, around people's mental health, why we wouldn't need more of that going forwards and out of this pandemic as we come out of it, fingers crossed, not back into it, here in the UK, around mental health and how we deal with that, how we support people, whether that's children right through to adults. From a personal perspective, I can't think how we can't change.
That there's a kind of exactly that area. There hasn't been we obviously focus on pre-seed to Series A, but I read a lot about the later stages. And unless I'm not reading the right things, there's not really a big king of the hill or queen of the hill, so to speak, in mental health. Like, in music tech, suddenly like it was Spotify and then SoundCloud, and then, and there's always, unless I'm wrong, is there something that people, there's Calm. I
was about to say there's Calm and Headspace, which I think, but that's it's not really.
I'll take this opportunity to plug one of our Notwix clients and also one of the Lal Ventures portfolio, which is PsyTech, which just recently released their grief app as part of the effort with Julia Samuel, MBE, VP of the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, which I did a LinkedIn post about. But
what are they called? I'm going to write it down. Sidekick? No, what did you say?
So it's PsyTech, Psychological Technologies.
Is it PYST?
Yeah. And they've done a new app called Grief Works, featuring Julia Samuel's content.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There you go. And that wasn't a layup at all. I'm completely innocent there. But I do think it's still, and as you mentioned, Evie, there's still a long way to go in that whole space. There's so much that we could do better through technology and it increasingly more so becomes a bigger and bigger problem in society that tech needs to fix. So thanks for that. And look, you've met a lot of founders, or you've been pitched to. If you had a top tip of I suppose what to do, and then maybe one what not to do, what would those two top tips from Evie be?
So one of them, the to do, would be always be in the mindset that you're fundraising. So if you're ever offered into, even if you're not about to close a round or leading up to a round, you're always fundraising, right? Investment is all about relationships. So you need to be building those relationships well before you think you're going to need them. And just the number of people who are offered an introduction to me and say, I'll let you know when I'll contact you when I'm fundraising again. So, no, just talk to me now. Like, you should be wanting to talk to me now, because then we've started the relationship, and then it's easy to pick back. Yes, by all means, update me when you are fundraising. So I think always being in that fundraising mindset, and not just get the cash in the bank, just
I'll
that
talk
long
to you
view.
when I need you.
Yeah, I talk to you, and then I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think, always being in that fundraising mentality, which is all about thinking all about relationships, and all is relationship driven.
Okay.
And then what not to do, I think, as a female founder, I would be, this is about going back to that, it's about the ecosystem, not the pipeline being the problem, is that female founders do not need to be fixed, and they should not feel that they need to be fixed and that they're not the problem. It's venture capital, and it's the way we as investors behave and interact and deploy our capital that needs to change. So I'd hate to think that I don't want female founders to be in the mindset that they're the ones that need to change, and quite frankly, it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Fantastic. And then you've mentioned children.
Yes.
Just kind of curious, is that outside of Astia? Do they take the whole Evie mindset and 24/7, or are there any things that when you get that downtime, books, Netflix, any tips? Obviously, we're in the summer season. People apparently have a bit more time to relax and
allegedly.
I know. I always think people always say, "Oh, the summer is quieter," but I don't know if that's ever true. I always like to think it's true, but not so much. Unless maybe we should move to one of those continental European countries that do it right and have a few weeks off that everyone leaves the office.
The shop is shut.
Yeah, exactly. I think we used to do it at Wednesday afternoons here in the UK, didn't we? Things were shut many years ago, and we all could take some time out. I love being by the sea, so that can be with children. It can be not. Can be without them. They don't take up all my time, but children do take up quite a. But being by the sea, whether it's on the sea or in the sea, and I think I live in the southwest.
You live in near the sea.
Ish. I live in the southwest, so I'm not going to spill too many secrets, because this year it's all about trying to find the sea without all the other hundreds of people that have come to the southwest. But being for mentally, but also just I think it's being out of the office next to
anything you're watching at the moment? Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Sky?
I don't get much time, but because I work with American colleagues, I don't get much time in the week to sit down and watch Netflix. But what I am looking forward to trying to watch is Baptiste Series 2 on iPlayer.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's mentioned that one yet.
No. There we go. I think it only. When did it start? 2 weeks
thing
ago.
with Baptiste. What's
it's
that?
Crime.
Okay. Is it a famous actor or?
He is now. The character was, but it's like a spin-off from The Missing, is it? I think. Anyway, it's the Missing and Baptiste. I think all the episodes from the previous. I recommend it. It's good.
Brilliant.
Watch The Missing first, and then Baptiste.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
But I'd love to think that I'd read a book before TV, but sometimes TV is just easier, isn't it, for the brain?
Yeah. Push it at me rather than
exactly, rather than
All right, well, look, it's been great to catch up, Evie. Thank you.
And you. Thank you both.
Keep up the great work, and I'm sure, or I hope, I will see you at maybe a physical event in the Q4.
That's exciting. You never know.